Hello, everybody. Hello, YouTube. Hello, Instagram. How you guys doing? Hope everybody's well. It's been a week since the last one. I just figured let me come and give you guys an update on what's going on. Hopefully today won't be too long. So I'm hoping everybody can join in. So what I wanted to talk about briefly was just an update on what's going on. And by the way, this thing is it's like a constant the news is coming in by the day. This is obviously a live issue. So the point is, as news comes in, we will update if we can. But for now, I'm just going to be focusing on the news up until this point. So first things first. Okay, so my title today is a little bit provocative. I know, the new Africa, a new Africa amidst the Niger coup. So again, those of you who are on Instagram, if you want to join in, come to the YouTube link. Hello, my people. I'm just going to give you people a few more minutes to come in. I'm starting a little bit late. I apologize. But, those of you who don't watch it live, you can always watch it back later on. Okay, so latest news. So where are we exactly? For those of you who don't know, as it stands, ECOWAS, of course, ECOWAS had this deadline, a 7-day deadline, which lapsed on Sunday. So immediately they placed sanctions, sanctions that included, so many things. Actually, I'll go into the sanctions in a minute, but let me just give you a summary. So they placed sanctions, and then, of course, they tried to, at the same time as placing sanctions, they tried to send in people to negotiate. They sent people from ECOWAS, they sent people from the AU, the US, the UN. All of those people were snubbed. All of them were snubbed. In fact, the ECOWAS delegation, they sent some big boys to the ECOWAS delegation. Former president of Nigeria, Abdulsalam Abubakar, the Sardana of Sokoto, which is like the premier of the Sokoto, what was once the Sokoto Caliphate, which basically ruled all of northern Nigeria back in the day. The Sardana, the king, basically, they sent him over. They kept them waiting at the airport. It's pretty embarrassing stuff. Anyway, so they were snubbed. Now, who is actually making some progress with the negotiation? It turns out it's somebody who actually was removed from his post as Emir of Kano, or Sarki of Kano. And if you're curious to know about what the Emir of Kano is, I made a documentary on my YouTube channel called Kano with Honora Abua. So the Sarkin, or the Emir, is essentially the king of the Kano city-state. But he went off his own back, a man called Lamido Sanusi, Lamido Sanusi. He went over on his own back and was successful and has been successful at negotiating, because, of course, there's a traditional connection that the northern Nigeria has with Niger. Shout out to Sergio, FK, Uchechuku. Good to see you, people. Give me a like, give me a shout. Let me just see who's here on YouTube. Hey, Lizzie, my sister. Lizzie, by the way, is our first member on the YouTube channel. My sister, thank you for joining. You've always been supportive. I really appreciate you. Hopefully we'll get to see you soon. I do want to do a live with my people, so it'd be good to see you. And thank you, of course, also for the super chat. Thank you, my sister. Modin guy, the whole Africa region is having a bitter uprising now. I guess the goal is resource preservation, severing ancient exploitative colonial ties. Exactly. And this is what we're going to get into a little bit today. So just a quick summary again. ECOWAS deadline passed, sanctions were placed, and as of recent, actually just 24 hours ago, ECOWAS decided that they are going to mobilize mobilize. They should alert the standby force of ECOWAS, which of course there isn't, but we're going to go into detail about that. Now, obviously, there is no standby force, so that's a problem. The idea was, if you remember last week, I talked about ECOMOG. ECOMOG was this army that was put together by largely West African nations when there was a conflict going on in Sierra Leone and Liberia. It was largely funded by Nigeria because, let's face it, they have the biggest army in the region and also have the most resources. So in theory, I think ECOWAS has the Accra Convention and the Lomé Convention, or Lomé Treaty, whatever it's called, which states that there should be some sort of unifying connection when it comes to putting an army together. But obviously, this Niger conflict has mostly to do with Nigeria and Niger. So more than likely to be Nigeria dealing with as far as mobilizing the troops. Now, obviously, mobilizing any troops, even if you have your own troops waiting there, even if you have an army yourself, it takes time to mobilize. Okay. And again, how many ECOWAS countries are going to be able to pay for tanks, pay for, supplies for the soldiers, even supply their own troops? How many? There are not many that will be able to do that. Keep in mind, Sierra Leone was only in a conflict. Sierra Leone and Liberia were only in a conflict 20 years ago, less than 20 years ago. Guinea is one of the poorest countries in the world. Niger, Mali, Niger, Mali, and Guinea are obviously now allies in their own way. So it's not as if they will be supporting ECOWAS. So you've now taken out 4 countries out of the ECOWAS team. 2 or 3 of them cannot even afford to supply anything because they're living in abject poverty. So what is this? This is essentially a bluff from ECOWAS, okay? I mean, you even look at the USA. USA has armies all over the world, all over the world. It's not as if they have soldiers just on standby waiting. They might have a small reconnaissance unit or a small unit of maybe 1,000 men, which they do even in Niger, or men and women, excuse me, who are there. And then if and when they need to mobilize more troops, they take time to prepare it. The so-called declaration of war on Iraq, it's not as if they decided today we're going to go to war and then tomorrow the troops were on the ground. No, it took months. Okay. We also have a problem in the Sahel. Sahel, of course, last week I talked to you guys about this. Sahel is the region which connects the desert part of Africa to the tropical part. So it's like a thin strip, looks like a snake, that goes right across from the northern part of Senegal, just above Senegal, through right across all the way through the central part of Africa, through Niger, through Chad, through Sudan, all the way to the coast. So that's the Sahel region in a way. Now, in that particular area, you have all sorts of different conflicts. You have the Tuareg people who want their own self-determination. You have ISIS, factions of ISIS. You have factions of Boko Haram. There's so much going on in that region. So to talk about let's go to war is complete chaos, okay? Shout out to D. Musa, Lizzie. Good to see you again. All right, next point. You know what I realized? I realized this last week. I made the same mistake. I removed myself. So let me just make sure I'm not doing it now. Again, shout out to my people who are on Instagram. So the next point I wanted to bring up quickly is what does a war between Niger and Nigeria actually mean? What does that mean? How does it physically manifest itself? Okay. So let me just bring up some of these points. Now, number one, I think this one is pretty obvious for anybody who understands the geography of this region, who's also been following the news. What's pretty clear, is a war with Niger, as from the Nigeria point of view, is essentially a war on northern Nigeria. It's a war on northern Nigeria, a war on the poor of that part of the world, a war on the desolate of Africa, those people who are fed up of all the economic mismanagement and neo-colonial structure that exists in this part of Africa. It's a war on all of them. Now, on the surface, this is not ECOWAS. On the surface, it's ECOWAS, but really, deep down, it's actually Nigeria. It's a war between Nigeria and the people that it shares a border with. 7 states border Niger. 7 of Nigeria's states. And even the states that are not bordering Niger have a very direct connection. Kano, for example, where I made my documentary, in terms of distance to Niger, it's not that far, even though it's not actually sharing a border. Nigerians are not just northerners, right? Or rather, it's not just northerners that are based in Niger. You have Igbo people, you have Yoruba people that live in Niger, but obviously the majority of the people that have a similar connection with northern Nigeria and Niger is the Hausa-speaking people, of which the majority of the north is, and the majority of that part of Niger are as well, the lower part of Niger. Even Buhari, I remember Buhari, if you remember, a few years ago made this joke about, I don't know if he was joking, he was talking about, what was it? He said that if they don't take time, he was joking that if they don't take time, I'll just move to Niger. He was making a joke about the conflict with Boko Haram. So this is something which is obviously something which again, remember the Berlin Conference of 1884 split Africa literally, in a way you could say they split two houses. They split a house into two. So upstairs is one country, downstairs is another country. The kitchen is one country, the living room is another country. So essentially, when they split these two countries up, they didn't take into consideration the connections that these people had from language, culture, religion, etc. Which is why, again, Lamido Sanusi, former emir of Kano, the only person who's successfully been able to go there and negotiate, or at least have some sort of dialogue with them, is a religious leader now, because remember, he was kicked out from his post as emir a few years ago, just before the pandemic. Okay, so again, ECOWAS cannot go to war as a bloc. Also, we need to remember this, without the UN Security Council approval, in theory, because no sovereign nation is allowed to go and invade another without the UN Security Council. Now, of course, where Europeans and Americans do it is very different to the way the rules are in Africa. But let's also not forget that ECOWAS is in its own way an economic bloc, but not a military. So it's economic. It's in fact, ECOWAS stands for economic economy. What's it? Economy of West African states. It's like 11 o'clock at night. My brain is really fried, so I apologize if I'm forgetting things. So it's not a military. It's an economic connection between people. Free movement of people. A bit like the European Union, where people are allowed to move around. They do share a currency, which in most parts of ECOWAS they do, the franc CFA, which we'll get to again. Free movement of people in theory, by the way, not a military group. There's no standing army in the European Union, nor is there a standing army in ECOWAS. So what's really happening is ECOWAS countries are essentially being pawns for the colonial masters, as usual. Okay, things are not really, really changing in that regard. They're just being pawns for their colonial masters. And I hate using the word masters, but it's very appropriate here, because we're seeing a master and slave complex manifest itself in real time. So, and the AU is like that, by the way. It's only in the last 5 years, if you remember, that the AU started funding itself. I think they got up to about 60%. This is when Paul Kagame was chairman of the AU, chair of the AU. This is like 2018, I think, where he said we're going to impose a tax on at airports for, like, if you purchase stuff at airports, that money will go towards that state, that African state, funding the African Union. Prior to that, the EU funded a lot of the African Union, which is quite embarrassing when you think about it. So how do they have it? How can they wield any power over their own decisions? If you don't fund your own self, you don't really have any control. Now, how will they approve it? When ECOWAS countries, how can ECOWAS even approve this when ECOWAS countries are split on this issue? You have 4 of them who are operating 3 of them operating the exact same thing as Niger, a military state. You have 2 or 3 who will abstain simply because they are Uncle Toms and Uncle Thomases, however you want to call them, and the rest of them are just don't want war. 9 out of 15 countries in ECOWAS could walk out of ECOWAS if Nigeria intervenes in Niger. So it automatically puts us in a place where war is not the answer. But let's just deal with how the different ways war can manifest itself. Dalip, good to see you, brother. Good to see you. Okay, I'll come to the comments in a minute. Again, I don't want to do what I did last week. Nigeria is already at war with Niger. Okay, this is the point that I wanted to highlight. Okay, let me just put that on the screen one more time. Nigeria is already at war with Niger. Not physically, obviously. There are no boots on the ground. But there are ways that people can launch a preemptive strike without any guns flying, without any bullets being shot at people, without any blood flowing in that sense. And let me just go through them. And I showed the hydroelectric dam at Kanji Dam, which is in Nigeria. So the first one, which is the obvious one, is they cut off power to Niger. Okay, so Nigeria supplies power to Niger. It has done since the 1970s. And the reason for this is not just because of, goodwill and charity, because Nigeria is a nice place. It's because if you follow the river Niger, the bend that it makes, and I showed you a nice map last week, the bend that it makes goes from Niger, bends south towards Nigeria and goes into the Delta region of Nigeria. Now, if they were to dam there, which is what they actually started to do, the people from Niger, to create their own power, it will give us limited water flow in Nigeria. So we said, you know what, let's use our dam and we'll supply you with power. Same issues going on along the Nile, by the way. For those of you who travel to Egypt, Ethiopia, Uganda. Uganda has a dam. Ethiopia wants the dam. But obviously, if you remember the story of Egypt, which you'll see in my documentary, in the region of Aswan, they built the high dam and the low dam, which created conflict. They not only conflict, they had to move whole regions of people, like the Nubian people, the darker skinned people. They had to move them from that region. And also it created a conflict because Ethiopia and all these other places want to also dam from the Nile. But Egypt is saying, I own it, essentially, by doing that. So Nigeria had to make this sort of arrangement. But what has Tinubu done? Tinubu is president of Nigeria, for those of you who don't know. Tinubu has gone and said, let me cut the power. Let me put you guys in darkness. Now, what does it mean when you cut power to a place? You're affecting businesses. Okay, so imagine something even as practical as somebody who sells ice cream. You sell ice cream, now the ice cream is melted. All that stock is gone. Obviously, that is a domino effect on the livelihood of the people. It increases insecurity. Okay, insecurity is the key one, because when it's dark, there's no light to for cars to drive. It's easy for thieves and so on to rob people on the streets, etc. Okay. It also means goods are expiring. Again, perishable goods that require a refrigeration, cold place for them to be stored. Those things cannot function anymore. And of course, the worst one probably is hospitals. If you have no power if you have no light to be able to see the surgery that you're doing on someone, what position are you putting these people in? So again, these sanctions that Tinubu has placed by cutting off power, just the cutting off power, is automatically attacking the poor, which is what we should not be doing. They've also closed the land and sea borders. Okay, so just think about that as well. Niger is, I think, I can't remember what it is, but it's the top 3 or top 5 poorest countries in the world. So they rely heavily on aid from places like America, etc., which is flown in. When you close the air, land, and sea, well, no sea borders, but you close the air and land borders, which Nigeria has closed the land borders, you can't fly the stuff in, which again creates more insecurity, causes inflation, because what's on the ground now becomes high value in a sense. So maybe if a bag of rice, for example, which maybe would have cost, I don't know, maybe like 5,000 CFA, francs CFA, which is the currency they use, maybe now is 3 times that amount, because it's now more valuable, because you don't know when more is coming in. That creates more insecurity. And also it means that prices of not just that, but everything from fuel to food goes up. Double, triple, quadruple. This is the sanctions. I know why you would place sanctions to frustrate the people, but that can create even more problems in the long run for the poor, because then you have a migration issue. People trying to leave to go somewhere where there's not that problem. And if the border is closed, the only border they can go to is north, east, or west. Okay, which are places which, Chad, Mali, and then northern border to Algeria. Okay, so not exactly places that people would run to, which are safe havens for people, because let's face it, they're either in the same state economically, or they are under strenuous circumstances and treat the recent migrants even worse. But that's I'm talking too far away. Now, Niger has just cancelled, I think they cancelled about 10 agreements that they had with France. Okay, 10 agreements that they had in France dating back to La France Afrique, which is the colonial era agreement that France had with its colonies in West Africa in particular, but Africa in general. This obviously affects the EU, which is the EU, which is essentially France's allies. These economic sanctions against the coup leaders as well that they've added, which in fact the Nigerian, the CBN, the Central Bank of Nigeria has had this coup, which had this has issued this sanction, which for me is quite confusing actually, because it's a sanction against people who are involved in the coup. So it's not necessarily Nigerians, people from Niger. It's probably people that are related to Mali and all the surrounding areas that may have supported the coup. So it's like, if you remember the Ukraine war, Russia-Ukraine war. So they imposed sanctions on Russia, obviously, the West did. But then, things like McDonald's can't be there anymore, bank transfers to Russia, all that stuff. But then they also imposed a sanction against individuals. So Roman Abramovich, the guy who owned Chelsea, they placed sanctions on him because they said, oh, he's a friend of Vladimir Putin. So I'm guessing this is what the CBN is trying to do by imposing this particular sanction against people involved in the coup somehow. Obviously, notwithstanding the military men that are involved. So, but in a nutshell, the sanctions only affect the really, really poor. Okay, President Tinubu cannot go into a physical war without the approval of his own nation. Without even his National Assembly. The National Assembly has to make a decision on, yes, A, we're going to war, and B, we're going to give you X amount to go to war. So what he's about to do is seriously embarrass Nigeria in the face of ECOWAS, which is just something that has never happened. Nigeria has always been seen as the most reputable nation in ECOWAS, so to speak. I'm sure Ghanaians will argue about that. I'm sure Senegalese will argue about that. But I'm just saying it purely from the standpoint of who has done the most for ECOWAS. And I'm going to get to that later. Again, majority of Nigerian states, the governors, the Northern Governors Forum, which is the governors who are from the northern borders with Niger, they've all said, no, we don't want any war. Keep in mind, as I mentioned last week, the Nigerian troops themselves are heavily occupied. We have Sambisa Forest in the north, which, we're fighting Boko Haram. In the southeast, we have the Biafra agitators, people trying to create a separate state in the southeast of Nigeria. So where are these troops going to come from? Okay, the only place you can maybe pull troops from is the southwest, the kind of Yoruba-speaking Lagos, that kind of area where conflicts are at a slight minimum compared to the rest of the country. So we have to really be careful about hypocrisy as Nigerians in particular. In 1975, when the ECOWAS treaty was first signed, okay? Just remember, 1975, how many years ago? 48 years ago. Nigeria at the time was under military rule. When they signed the ECOWAS treaty, the ECOWAS, which is supposedly governing this whole idea of democracy and maintaining democracy, the ECOWAS, which Bola Ahmed Tinubu is saying, let's go and issue sanctions against these people. At the time that your country entered it, you yourself were under military rule. So if they succeed in Niger, and this is an issue, if they do go to war and they succeed, they will also have to think about, okay, what do we now have if we succeed at what we want? We're going to have to go and do the same thing in Mali, in Guinea, in what's the other place? Mali, Guinea, Burkina Faso. Okay? Because they all have the same military rule as Niger. Okay? So we have to be very careful about what we're prepared to do. And I know this was a bluff, but these are things that everybody needs to be aware of. Let me take some of your comments. So those of you on YouTube, if you're still there, on Instagram, if you're still there, join in. Oof, I missed out a few. So Lizzie, thanks again for the super chat. I guess to go. Oh yeah, I read this. AFRICOM has a deep hand in it all as well. US AFRICOM operates through training. Subservient militaries do their bidding. Yes, very good point. This is the point. These countries have serious issues to address in their respective states, and they are dealing with this drama. Absolutely. Son of Nok, my brother, good to see you. Nigeria itself has no money. The only source of income, the oil, is being stolen by the officials in cahoots with the Western countries. Shout out to Modin Guy. Thank you very much for the super chat. Much appreciated, my brother. Or my brother. Let me not get somebody's gender wrong. Son of Knock, Nigerian officials steal all the oil for themselves, then borrow money meant to pay salaries, then steal the borrowed money. You know, we know that the Nigerian Senate, Nigerian senators are amongst the highest paying lawmakers in the world. You know, and that comes in the form of not just their salaries, but the bonuses, not bonuses, the benefits that they get, housing, transportation, etc. Really a con. Would you consider ECOWAS Nigerian military just neo-colonial fronts in the region at this point? Very good question, D. Musa Springer. Very good question. I'm going to address it at some point today. Please remind me if I don't, but I have, it's part of my notes. Buhari has repeated that joke several times. Thank you. This is the joke about Niger. I'll move to Niger because they're that interconnected. In fact, if you even see the Kanuri people from a place called Borno State, eastern Nigeria. Northeastern Nigeria. Is it northeast? Yeah, northeastern Nigeria. So where Sambisa Forest is. This was part, this and the southern part of Niger were once part of the Kanem Borno Empire. So they are Kanuri speakers and Kanuri ethnic group, but they're also Hausa speakers from that same part. So you have multiple connections with Niger culturally. Yeah, okay. Son of Nok, the economic community. Oh, thank you. Economic community. My brain is half past midnight where I am, so I appreciate that. The backwardness, Niger uranium goes to power France, which Nigerian dam has to power Niger. Absolute backwardness. Uranium is an element. It's a resource that is required for, you know, you could do so much with it apart from creating nuclear power, but you could also generate nuclear power, you know, but we are, you know, again, this has to do with the way we are programmed, but I'll come to that. Did you see the article about Gary prices increasing in Nigeria because of the sanctions? Interesting point. Interesting point. They are sitting near the Nigeria border. Nigeria is, as an entity, is just a facade. It doesn't make sense. Very good point. D. Musa Springer, thank you very much. Another member of our of the channel. Thank you so much for joining in. Appreciate you. Ricky Bobby, maybe their plan is to push Niger to befriend the Chinese. Their plan is to push Niger to befriend the Chinese. By that, I think you mean, just explain what you mean. I'm not really sure. Nigeria president is like a king. They don't obey their own constitution, not to obey court orders. Damn the toothless Senate. Son of North Chad. Galactic. Hey, Galactic Soul, good to see you. When did this start? Hi, everyone. Yes, we started about 40 minutes. No, is it up to 40? About 30 minutes ago. All right, let me carry on so that we don't, I don't take too much of your time. So let me take this off. So the next thing I wanted to bring up is about Tinubu in particular. We were warned about President Tinubu. For those of you who watched my live a few months ago about the presidency, I talked about how dodgy this guy is as a character. We were warned about him. And let me give you a disclaimer, actually, so that it doesn't seem like I'm completely biased. It is very unfortunate for him as a head of state that he happens to be the chair of ECOWAS and president of Nigeria at this particular time. You know, the fact that he's chair of ECOWAS and has to be bordered with Niger, it's unfortunate for him. Okay, so let me just first of all say that. But let's look at his actions. His first act since coming into presidency, excuse me. His first act since coming into the presidency was to remove the fuel subsidy. That's the first thing he did. For those of you who don't know, the fuel subsidy is something that's put in place so that fuel should be at a discounted rate for locals. Okay, it's put there for a reason. But in Nigeria, you know, so say for example, Venezuela. I haven't been there, but for what I know, Venezuela fuel is relatively cheap to buy for locals. It's dirt cheap because they are a great oil producing, petroleum producing nation. So the subsidy is there to make it cheaper for them. But in Nigeria, they keep removing this subsidy. In fact, there's a very good documentary by a man called Ishaya Bako called Fueling Poverty. The documentary was made about 11 years ago when Goodluck Jonathan removed the subsidy then. Under Okonjo Iweala, who you people praise at the World Bank, this woman who people praise that she's a giant of Africa, Watch my documentary I made on the Moyele show, right? It's also on the channel. Go and find out what this woman did. She's not, we like to look too much at, how people are presented. Oh, it's black woman, African woman. She's elegant. She speaks well, and she's at the head of this. She's at the head of that. But what is she doing for her own people? Don't forget, this woman was finance minister. So anyway, let's not go there. So his first act is to remove the fuel subsidy. Then, if you remember, he stupidly floated the naira, saying that he wants it to be on par with the dollar. It was already bad before under Buhari, by the way, but he took it to another level. A pound, I changed the pound a few days ago. 1 pound, I changed pound, sorry. 1 pound, UK pound, so essentially $1.15 is about 1,100 naira. 2 or 3 years. When was that? Okay, I was last in Nigeria last year. Last year, it was about 600, 700. The year before that, it was about 600. So it's gradually getting worse. But between Buhari and this man, we have gone to a stupid level. We have gone to almost a Ghana level. For those of you who were in Ghana before President Kufuor, so we're talking pre-1999, no, even pre-2005. If you used to go to Ghana, if you want to buy bread, you need you need to hold like a big rucksack just to go and buy bread, because you need to, and that's an exaggeration, by the way. Ghanaians, don't get angry with me. But you need to carry a lot of money because the CDs were absolutely useless. So that's what one of the things he said. Also, keep in mind, 3 months into his pregnancy, the man is on the verge. On the verge. He wants to go to war. He wants to go to war with a country that shares a border with 7 states in his country. 7 out of 36 states have a frontier with this country that he wants to go to war with. Is he thinking in the best interest of his people? The man is issuing ultimatums that he can't keep. You cannot say, we'll give you 7 days and we'll go and start. We'll have to respond by force. You cannot start saying these things in in the first few months of being in power. And I know maybe there might be procedures. And by the way, my father was a diplomat, but me myself, I'm not. I studied international relations. But I never actually practiced it in that part of Africa. So I can't tell you for sure whether there's a procedure, and I'm sure there is an ECOWAS parliamentary procedure, as well as one for the National Assembly in Nigeria. But I'm pretty sure the way he's saying these things publicly is not the procedure, because we've seen it done elsewhere. It's exposing his inexperience. Okay? This man is ruling by, and I just want to make sure, am I still on? Can you guys still see me? Sorry, let me just make sure. You guys can still see me, right? Okay, perfect. The man is exposing his inexperience. He's exposing it. Okay? Diplomacy, you rule by diplomacy, not your own personal interests. The man hasn't even finished picking his cabinet. Remember, the inauguration was in May. The man hasn't finished the screening process yet. His cabinet is not yet complete. And by the way, you pick a cabinet of ministers to advise you on situations like this. You don't have a minister of foreign affairs who is advising you. My father was the Deputy Director General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Nigeria. As educated as he was, he couldn't walk in and advise the president. The minister had to do it. He's still in court. Tinubu is still in court as we speak, fighting his own election results. The man is still in court fighting his election results, but he has the audacity to be going and commanding. The man broke a treaty signed decades ago to provide power. We provide 70% of the power to Niger. He broke a treaty. Now, for those of you who are sticklers for facts, in reality, Niger had already breached this, by the way, because they weren't supposed to build a dam, but they still built a dam there during, I think, Buhari's time. So they broke it first. But, nevertheless, he himself is also in breach of that. But is he cutting off the power because they breached it first, or is he doing it as a sanction? He's doing it as a sanction. I bet the man didn't even know they have a dam in Niger. And again, I have to emphasize this: it is not charity. This deal was done because if they built a very powerful hydroelectric dam, it affects us and the water supply in Nigeria through the Niger. He's on many levels, you could say, even just with the screening of his cabinet, the screening ministers, he's marginalizing Igbos. I'm an Igbo man, so I'm not here to try and make this about me or anything like that, but it's just something that's pretty obvious. I think they got 9 from the southwest, 10 from the northeast. I think you only had 5 people from southeast, 5 Igbos. It's you're creating a lot of these issues, as usual. He's doing what he wants rather than listening to Nigerians. Those of you, I don't know, people who are in the chat, give me a 1 if you grew up in Lagos or anything like that. For those of you who grew up in Lagos around the late 90s, early 2000s, when Tinubu was governor of Lagos, I remember the man would be driving around on a Saturday. We used to have this thing called environmental, which is a day where you're supposed to stay in and clean your house. You don't leave your house till, is it after 1 or after 2? And there were times when you see him driving around up and down in a Black Maria, the big lorry, this kind of arrogant, like, I'm the king of Lagos. And of course, Tinubu comes from it comes from the nobility of Lagos, if you will. So there's that element of arrogance. But he has this, in Yoruba, they call it Emilokan. This is like, it is my turn attitude. It's my turn to be president. For those of you from 2021, excuse me, when there was talk about him running, this man was saying, it is my turn, Emilokan. He was there like saying, it doesn't matter about whether my policies are good, nothing. It is my turn to become president of Nigeria. So that attitude he's bringing into the presidency. And he's not the only one, by the way. If you look in Gambia, Adama Barrow, he also wants to invade Burkina Faso. So these are people who are just doing the deeds of the West. The man sent retired Brigadier General Abdusalami Abubakar Sadana of Sokoto, the top, the highest of the highest, big boys, but old nevertheless, to go and have talks with these people. And they were humiliated. They were left at the airport, was it 4 or 5 hours they were left at the airport. They said the Nigerian junta said, we don't want you, for security reasons, we don't want you to leave the airport. Quite embarrassing. You send these men to embarrass themselves. Send at least 1 or 2 diplomats, but you don't have anybody, you don't even have a minister, And I'm going to come to how Nigeria used to treat diplomacy back in the day, so that you don't think this is how we've always done it, okay? Now, if Tinubu goes to war, right, because this is what he wants, technically he's in a violation, as I said, of ECOWAS treaties and the Nigerian constitution, okay? Even the, what do they call this thing? The Vienna Agreement, okay? Now, just even going to war against the wishes of the Nigerian constitution is an impeachable offense. Impeachable, meaning he can be removed from his position. He's putting us, Nigerian people, Nigerians, in a position where by sanctioning Niger so heavily, you're actually acting outside of Nigeria's best interest. By sanctioning these people so heavily, you are acting outside of our best interest. So Bola Ahmed Tinubu, Asiwaju, he doesn't even have a minister of foreign affairs. Get one first. Let him advise you before you start carrying on. Okay? All right, we're going to move on. The next thing I wanted to talk about quickly is, let's not underestimate these people from Niger. Please. Because, we have this, Eddie De Brito is on Instagram. Good to see you, my brother. Question: didn't Nigerian House of Parliament vote not to go to work, not to go to war? Yeah, absolutely. They said they don't want to go to war. Okay, so let me just carry on with what I'm doing, and then we'll finish up. Excuse me. Okay, good to see the comments. Please keep the likes, but hit the like button, please, my people. Please, please, please. Okay, now, let's not underestimate these people from Niger. Now, I saw a TikTok video earlier in the week where somebody broke down the size of the Niger army arsenal, as well as the troops. They have something like about 13,000 troops. Nigeria has probably something about 200,000 troops, with about 150,000 of those active. The Nigerians, let me say it with the French accent, Nigerian, because it's Nigeriens. Okay, so Nigerians officers were partially trained by the Nigerian army. Also, we have places like Jaji Military Academy in Kaduna. For those of you who are from the north, Lizzie, are you from the north? I can't tell. You Nigerian from the north? Just let me know. We have an excess amount of tanks in comparison to them. It's and in theory we should beat them comfortably if we were to go to war. But somebody pointed out this very interesting analogy, which made me think about this particular war. Keep in mind, Niger is a massive country, but very small population, and it's not as economically buoyant, but it has a terrain that is dangerous for war. There's this analogy about the camel and the scorpion. For those of you who know, for those of you from northern Nigeria, maybe you know this, or from that part of the world. I heard it in Mali as well. Is that the camel, as strong as it is, it can cross from one side of Africa to the other. But when it sees a scorpion, it runs. It runs for its life. And in a way, the camel is Nigeria and the scorpion is Niger. Because remember, Niger has allies. It has allies who are very bold in Mali, Chad, Burkina, Guinea. And if you want to, you can include Sudan in there, because that military alliance, the military boys club or girls club, is one which can be close to, in a situation like this, especially when they control the center of Africa, if you will, and the gateway of Africa in terms of the Sahara into the tropical land. They are in a very strategic position. Plus, they have a major backer. Now, what about the jihadis in the region, the extremists? What about Wagner, the Wagner group, who are on their way to Niger? Keep in mind, Vladimir Putin visited Burkina Faso, and President Traore, our young Thomas Sankara, said Russia would give them weapons free of charge. Okay, I'm going to get to Russia later, so let's not make this about Russia just yet. But Niger is clearly doing something because they are bold enough to do it. It's like standing up to a bully, if you will. Standing up to a bully on your own when you know the bully is going to come back with 4 of his guys and beat you up is one thing. Now, if you trap the bully and you say, hey, come and get me, you throw stones at him, come and get me, he chases you, and he chases you around the corner and 20 of your guys are there, that bully is all of a sudden in a predicament. And I'm not saying Russia is going to defeat all of ECOWAS as well as all of its allies in the West. I'm just simply saying that the confidence that Niger has is because it has its big brothers, its big cousins around them, who are also backed by a bigger person in the form of Russia. So this is really US, UK, and NATO versus Russia as proxies, and Niger, Burkina, and all these places are the proxies. Nigeria on one side, ECOWAS on one side, and the other side is these nations that are under military control. Look, we've seen the USA go to Somalia and fail miserably in 1993, 1994. For those of you who like movies, what's the name of the movie? Black Hawk Down. If you want to understand exactly what happened when the USA went into Somalia, thinking that we can just go and intervene, they're not stupid enough. In fact, it's one of the reasons why the following year that they claim they didn't go into Rwanda the following year. So they're not about to just fly troops into the middle of Niamey and go and help defeat the military junta. They're not in 2023 anyway. So why are they turning down the AU, ECOWAS, and the US delegations? It's because they are backed by someone in the form of Russia. All right, let me take some of your points. Wow, you guys, the comments are really, really coming today. Did you see where am I? Okay. Okay. So if the West supports war and sanctions Niger, oh no, I've done this one. Okay, Lizzie, do you find it ironic or coincidental that this time we're looking at Africa to move to and do business with what, with with this event, things on the brink of going chaotic? Look, we're gonna have to do business with someone, and I'm gonna touch on that towards the end as well. Lucky Sinclair, good to see you. Greetings from Kingston, Jamaica. We are here listening. Greetings, my people. Okonji Iweala is also a stooge. Absolutely. This is the one, and I said it earlier, but I want to emphasize this again. We need to be careful about all these people that we praise simply because it's a black woman or a black man doing something in the world. We have to be very, very careful. Okonji Iweala, what she did to the Nigerian government, and again, I'm going to recommend, it's a plug, go and watch my documentary on Omoyele Sowore, where I touch on this as well. Lucky Sinclair, isn't that woman was charged for money laundering in the States? I think you're thinking of Diziani Alison Madueke, who was former petroleum minister. Was it in the States that she got? Yeah, I think it was in the States. Modern guy, thank you for the super chat. Isn't Niger a sleeping giant? Shout out to Ibrahim. Yeah, shout out to Ibrahim Traore. Lucky Sinclair, oh, excuse me. Uchabua, thank you. Let's keep the super chats. Yes, please keep the super chats going and hit the like button as well. Son of Nok, Tinubu has dementia related to Parkinson's disease. I'm in Somalia. Please, we Africans must love each other and out of Western countries because they are eating our people and they are drinking our home or the Lizzie, the tribunal hasn't ruled on his legitimacy. There you go. Man is still fighting in court as we speak to decide whether or not his mandate as president is legitimate. From you see that man, you see greed. Does anyone know his antecedents as governor of Lagos? His wealth is from converting the assets of Lagos to his name. Actually, if you add to that, his wealth is from, I think he managed the bank. So he went to America, went to Chicago, studied in Chicago. Obviously, many of you know about the case dealing with, the drug dealer allegations of him being a drug dealer when he was in the States. Comes back with that wealth and maybe connections with the bank. Becomes a senator during our the Third Republic, briefly. The Third Republic, became a senator. Years later, when we had Obasanjo, when democracy came back in 1999, he became governor of Lagos. But as you said, the assets of Lagos became his. He's essentially, they call him the Jagaban. He is, Lagos, you hear him. Everybody who becomes governor of Lagos has to go and kiss the ring of Asiwaju Tinubu. I had Kamala call Tinubu and told him that they had dirt on him, so he had to do the bidding of the US. His dirt has been there before he was president, Galactic Soul. Yep, he said that in Abeokuta. Modinga, I noticed West Africa is full of political instability or corruption, just like some parts of the Caribbean. It's the black world, my people. Modinga, it's the black world. Galactic Soul, thank you so much for the super chat. Appreciate you. God bless you. It's time for France to leave. US has 100 million drone bases, 100 million drone base in Niger. They are asking for nuclear energy power, Lizzie, new Cold War loading, absolutely. Similar to Vietnam or Afghanistan. Yep, in many ways, but I don't think the US will put boots on the ground like they did in Vietnam or Afghanistan. Black Hawk Down failed Somalia, and now France failed Niger. Okay, perfect. Thank you for the chats, guys. I'm going to keep on with the show. Appreciate you doing this. Next point I wanted to bring up really is a Nigeria appreciation, briefly, because I think, context in these things, we just always lose it somehow. We just forget that, it's easy to bash a country like Nigeria in circumstances like this, simply because, those of you who go to Nigeria from Nigeria, you know how bad internally the country is, but its reputation outside over the last 2 or 3 decades has been one that we should be proud of. Let me just quickly just say make this point again. Niger itself as a country has no health sector, no education, no farmland. Okay, and I think when we're talking about this whole idea of being pawns between Russia and the West, we need to remember that these people, as much as they dislike each other, for instance, Western Europe might hate Russia, they still do business. At least, up until recently, until Russia invaded Ukraine, they still did business. They relied heavily on Russia for their oil. In the same way, when you look at our situation, look at this trans-Saharan pipeline that the West has created to create this power between that goes through Niger, through Algeria, all the way to Morocco, and then into the EU, right? Into Europe. This has now been interrupted. So before we even start talking about why people in Niger want independence, removal of the presidency, we need to remember these things are all going on underground, literally. So this pipeline that's going from Nigeria all the way through across the Sahara Desert over to Morocco and into Europe is affected by what is going on in Niger. So let's just keep that in mind. And of course, again, when we start talking about these fake statements, this whole idea of we're restoring democracy argument, restoring democracy, it's disingenuous. Let's say, for example, they restore President Bazoum by force. Let's say they impose. Let's even say he doesn't get restored. Let's say they manage to kick out the military and they impose somebody else as president. Look at Iraq today. This is what happens when you go into a place and say, okay, your democracy or your government, which by the way is decided by the people one way or another. You see, that military is not there because the people said absolutely, because the president was doing well and the military came and took over because they wanted to do their own thing. No, it's because the government was doing badly, however you want to look at it. But look at places where they've gone and reconfigured their democracies. Iraq is in a terrible state. You destabilize Libya and you see the domino effect elsewhere. You see, even in Egypt, I talked about Egypt last week. You may not like Hosni Mubarak, but Hosni Mubarak being removed created instability. There were military coups and so on going on in Egypt for the last decade. There is a government in Niger right now, however you want to look at it, whatever they wear, whether they wear military fatigues or they wear agbada, regardless of how it came about, this is an internal issue for Niger. These Westerners, these Europeans, Americans, they never ever come to our assistance when people are being slaughtered by Boko Haram, when people can't eat, when people are going through all sorts of issues. They don't come, they'll just throw some little aid, but you don't want to intervene until then. You won't even, in the case of Nigeria, you won't even release Nnamdi Kanu, who, for those of you who know regarding the Igbo question, Son of Nok, I think, is Igbo, so he knows this point. This is a man who's been agitating for an independent Biafra. No matter what his basis is for it, it's as a byproduct of many of the activists we have in Nigeria, basically saying the country is terrible, let's at least go and start our own. This man was taken from Kenya, extradited, kidnapped actually from Kenya by the DSS, Department of State Security Services, which is basically our, I guess, a combination of our CIA and FBI, and kidnapped and brought back to Nigeria and arrested. The High Court in Abia State, I think it was, last year, ruled that his arrest was illegal. And a year later, they still haven't released him. You won't even do that, but we have the audacity to go into places and start telling them, you people need to go and do this or do that, otherwise we'll send army. It's ridiculous. But let me go back. Let me start bigging up Nigeria small. Nigeria is the big brother of Africa and the black world, by the way. We simply cannot quantify Nigeria's support for the African world. Again, my father worked for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, was involved heavily in the work that was done to end apartheid in South Africa, free Nelson Mandela, etc. Those who have even a bit of memory or even historical knowledge about this, you know that there is no way even ECOWAS can repay Nigeria for the work that it's done over the last 20, 30 years. We've done far more politically than any other country in Africa for the African continent. Think about it. This is not me being biased or anything like that. Look at Angola. Angola, I talked about last week, was fighting a war with the Portuguese. Murtala Mohammed at the time, if you remember, was the president. This is 1976, I think he was killed. Was it 76? But around that time period, 75 is when the Portuguese revolted. There was a revolution in Portugal, and then Angola got its independence. But he supported Angola. We support Nigeria as a bloc supported South Africa. The obvious ones are Liberia and Sierra Leone. We sent in troops to go and keep the peace in Liberia and Sierra Leone. Liberia and Sierra Leone till today will not be able to pay Nigeria back for what they've done. They cannot. Nigeria has spread and developed. This is quite controversial, but Nigeria has spread and developed African culture far more than any black person, place, thing, nation has ever done. We've done it through our movies, through our music. You go and look at a wedding, and again, half of my family is from Eastern Africa, half is from Nigeria. But when you and it's specifically, okay, let me not even be specific about which tribe or ethnic group, but they go and are able to take from Nigeria and convert it to their own culture. Through the movies, through the music, through even the wedding fashion, the ashebi, the idea of the way you dress for a wedding. Go to East Africa, they're doing the same thing. They're wearing the head tie, the ashoke and all these things. We are dressing and carrying out our procedures like Nigerians. Nigeria or Nigerians, let me not say Nigeria, be careful. Nigerians have spread commerce across the black world. Go to America, the number one nation that you hear of doing, innovative things out of the black countries, let me be specific, it's very often Nigeria. Of course, there's also another dark side too, but for the most part, you hear it. What we've done in Africa. You hear of the xenophobia that's going on in South Africa. You hear of all sorts of issues going on all around the world. It's because Nigerians are going there and establishing commerce. Again, I'm not saying this is a perfect thing and they do it well all the time, but I'm just speaking in general terms. Murtala Mohammed, president in 1976, was killed because of the Angola issue. When he was assassinated, it was because of the Angola issue. For those of you who don't know, go and look into how the US supported Angola when there were three fronts during the War of Independence, if you want to call it that. So, and also, just special shout out just for today, respect to the Nigerian Senate. As much as we talk about how overpaid they are, etc., they rejected us going to war. They rejected Nigeria from going to war. So, in a way, we have to put some respect on Nigeria's name, just a little bit. We have to put some respect on Nigeria's name. It's not just a nation that is known as the giants of Africa for no reason. We're actually, in many ways, we've put it to the test. Shout out to Modinga. Thank you very much for the super chat. One North, South, West African currency, or just exactly. But these are the things these are the solutions which we will come to. And again, people, I would love for some of you to jump on if you have any comments towards the end. So please don't let it just be about me. Don't let it just be about me. Instagram, who are the African leaders who can be trusted? I thought that the Kenyan president was one of them, but now I'm having second thoughts. Trust is not the issue. There's no leader in the world that can be trusted, period. This isn't about trust. It's more to do with who can do the right things at the right time. Okay, so Nigeria is the big brother of Africa. And just in this image, I want you guys to see what I'm talking about. So in particular, I'm referring to the bottom right. You see Murtala Mohammed. Just to the left of that, that's the Nigerian troops, ECOWAS troops, if you will, that are going into Sierra Leone and later Liberia. Just above that is the Senate. And to the left of that, you see the country and all the places it's neighboring. For what we want to say, for whatever Nigeria is not doing, what it does well, it really does well. Okay. So next point I want to bring up, the legacy of France in Africa. This one will probably need a little bit of time, but I'm going to try and rush through it. I'm going to talk about the beginnings, the economic structure, the education, and the insecurity that is in the region now. Okay. Let's just go through this bit by bit. So how did France's legacy in Africa begin? Well, again, it goes back to people like René Caillé, who was an explorer during the Middle Ages, coming to see the great city of Timbuktu. you know, the people of Timbuktu, the people of Mali, Songhai Empire were able to do such great things that word spread. Okay, and of course, there's the slave trade aspect, etc. But as far as the France coming to stay aspect, we have to go to the Berlin Conference, which, as you know, various countries attended. The obvious ones we know, even USA was present, Turkey was present, Russia was present. They were all present. Some took some took a little bit, some didn't get any. But France, without question, took a huge chunk, in particular in West Africa or Western Africa. And of course, as part of their control, they committed some really, when you think about it now, some unspeakable acts of inhumanity against African people. We know what the Belgians did, we know what the Portuguese did, but the French did it in such a covert way, you know, that it messed up the psyche of African people who were colonized by France. It's not to say the British were perfect, but the British, because of the indirect rule aspect, which is we'll leave you to do your thing, but just pay taxes to us, we'll run you, in that sense, which they did in, they left for the most part, the Ashanti sort of people to run Ghana, if you will, because at that point, Ghana, or what was called the Gold Coast when it was assembled by the British, was pretty much colonized by the Ashanti. Nigeria, on the other hand, was too chaotic for them to try and manage. So they were like, you know what, you people, manage your thing. We'll just stay here, count the taxes, and whatever. So in a way, they created Nigeria and Ghana, the British did, to be able to flourish in a different way. Of course, it's not to say that they never let go, but with France, it was so much more controlling. There's the economic power aspect of it, okay? The economic power one is the one which, because economic power really is independence. You don't have independence unless you have economic power. I cannot begin to start telling you that, oh, I have a job, so I'm financially free. Because if that job sacks me tomorrow, fires me tomorrow, we see how free I am. I'm free to do what I like, but before long, I'll lose my house, I'll lose everything. The French currency, the franc CFA, we've talked so much about it, there's no need to talk about it. I grew up, I went to school in Togo, as you know, where they use the franc CFA. And the drive from Togo to Nigeria, we've crossed over through Benin, they use the franc CFA. So the franc CFA is a very big part of my childhood. We change it on the black market at the borders. The rate in Togo is a little bit better than the rate in Benin, but it's still the same currency, still the exact same paper. When I travel to Mali, when I travel to Senegal, when I travel to Burkina Faso, it's the franc CFA, right? Franc. Keep in mind, France gave up the franc in the year 2000 when they joined the euro, right? So essentially, France is giving them a currency that they don't even use and managing that currency. They're also saying to them that your foreign reserve, the money that every country is supposed to, let's just say the money they keep in the bank, if you will, keep it in France. So when you want that money, you have to go and apply to us. We'll give it to you, and you pay it back to us in the form of a loan with the interest. On top of that, you now have to pay us, as your former colonial masters, an annual payment, almost like a colonial tax, colonial legacy tax. For those of you who know the story of Gbagbo, actually, no, I'll talk about that in a minute. But anybody who's tried to oppose that has been dealt with. So when this is the situation that is occurring in the French-speaking countries of Africa, French colonized countries of Africa, it's really no wonder that 90% of the 100+ military coups that took place in Africa, not just today, but 90% of the 100+ military coups that took place in Africa took place in French-speaking countries. It's not a surprise, with the exception of maybe Senegal. Yes, Senegal. Niger had 5 coups since its independence. Forget this one that just happened. The last one before this one, don't forget, was in 2010, which Bazoum, by the way, if you go back and look at YouTube footage, Bazoum was on the streets supporting, saying, yes, 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 this coup is right. 13 years ago. So, coups in Niger have been a regular thing, and you might oppose a coup today if it doesn't favor you, and tomorrow you might support it. So let's just be careful. Togo, for example, and I just put out a short YouTube short today, where I talk a little bit about Togo from last week. Togo had its first coup, the first coup rather, in sub-Saharan Africa. Keep that in mind. French colony, tiny little country. In 1963, they had this coup. It was bloody. They killed the president, Silvio Olympio, and then they established Nasimbe Yadema as the president. But all these coups, not just the Togolese coups, but all the coups that took place subsequently, the coup that removed Thomas Sankara, the coup that removed this person, the coup that removed that person, they were all orchestrated at the Elysee Palace in Paris, in France. Whether it was Charles de Gaulle, President Mitterrand, it doesn't matter who, Nicolas Sarkozy, all these people were involved in orchestrating this coup. However you want to design it or phrase it, this is the case. And that's why any leader who opposed France was removed. Again, go to Ivory Coast in 2010. Laurent Gbagbo dared to say to France, why should I continue paying you guys this tax? Why should I continue to pay you tax for the presidential palace? It's my country's. It doesn't belong to you. Yes, you may have taken some Africans and forced them to build it and, claimed it for your own, but it's not your own. And you saw how they really embarrassed this man, Laurent Gbagbo. And you see, Ouattara was so quick to waiting in the wings to come and step in and do the bidding of France. And by the way, when Ouattara is talking about this whole ECOWAS issue, he needs to shut up. He needs to stop talking because, all he's doing is perpetuating his love for France or his Uncle Tomness, for those in America who understand the phrase. Why did the French Defense Council, and this I only found out recently, why is it that I think within 24 hours after the coup in Niger, they called a meeting? They called a meeting, and if you remember, the African leaders at the time were in Russia, in St. Petersburg, in Russia, at the summit. Most of the African leaders, not all, but some obviously were home, especially those who were loyal to France. Those ones ran and had this meeting with this ECOWAS meeting with France. So this meeting, if I remember correctly, was attended by leaders loyal to France, but France was essentially conducting it. So the French military defense council was having a meeting about Niger. It's no wonder France is burning today. Those of you who go to France, you just see how chaotic the place is. It doesn't matter which part of France, there's always some sort of issue in France because they just haven't figured out how to mind their business. They had their revolution 200 plus years ago because their king was doing too much. And now their leaders are essentially acting as though those subjects that were existing during the French Revolution are Africans today. Those are their subjects. And they go and they know that the migrants from Africa who are raising their children in France, they feel the exact same way. It's no wonder France is burning. Africans are running. But this is the irony. If we are really independent, right? If France is independent, for anyone who wants to debate it and say, oh, this is just African leaders that are not that good. If Africa was really independent, why would Africans be jetting through the Sahara Desert to try and get to North Africa and then to Europe? If it was really independent. Okay, that's not just France. That's, but ironically, actually, for those of you who passed through France, sorry, not passed through France, for those of you who visited France, migrants are going past Italy, past Spain, past Germany in many cases, past France, and they go to Calais. Why? Because they want to get into the United Kingdom. Now, we're not saying in terms of colonial leaders, we're not saying colonialism is a good thing. But the way the British have now started to create their society, so-called, seems more appealing to these people. So they will even go past France to try and get to England. Okay, we'll deal with this British thing later because I don't want to make it seem as though Britain is some perfect place. But anyway, so let's even look at, they just recently returned Patrice Lumumba's tooth For those of you who know this story, they just returned the tooth to his family. This man died 60 years ago, and they've only just returned his tooth. Keep in mind, the USA, France, and Belgium were involved in his assassination. And it's just now, 60 years later, that they're returning his tooth. You know, anywhere that France has been has created problems. I'm sorry. Look at the electricity aspect. 15% of the uranium from Niger is going to France. Yet there is no power in Niger. Okay, fine. We know the Nigeria is supplying most of their power, but why is there no nuclear power? They have to get it from Nigeria. Look at the education. The first university in Niger, I found out, was it was established in the 1980s. The first university. In Mali, the first university was in the 1990s. In Chad, it was in the late 70s. And remember, whatever education that existed at the time of independence, only the elites could afford to travel to France and America, or what have you, to go and study, because these universities didn't exist. Now, again, I'm giving the British comparison. In a place like Nigeria, by 1970, we had dozens of universities. In fact, at the time of independence in 1960, not just, it was different in different places, but in 1960, at the time that we had independence for most of Africa, Nigeria had thousands of educated to the university level individuals who could manage the civil servants, manage government. Okay, we messed up. Take somewhere like Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo now, Zaire, or at that point, what was it called? What was the nation called? Was it Congo? What was the name? Anyway, Congo, Kinshasa, Congo, then Leopoldville. Patrice Lumumba and co. were one of about 50 individuals who had what they call the civilization test. They had to pass the civilization test. Can you use a fork and knife? Can you talk a certain way? Not the degree. That's why if you look at Mobutu Sese Seko, who was in essentially the gendarmerie, so not fully in the army, when the destabilization of the country happened, when Lumumba and co. were toppled and Chombe was trying to do his thing, it was Mobutu Sese Seko that had to step in, because he was the only one who was in any way trained to be in the army, because the Belgians specifically kept Africans away from this. They wanted them to be uncivilized. French did a similar thing. French, the sheer idea was to aspire to French nationality, to the point where people like Blaise Diagne, for example, of Senegal, was the first black man elected to the French parliament. Not to say that he's the first black politician from Senegal, but he's the first black elected to French parliament. Think about that. The idea was the only way you could be called civilized is if you are French. Let's move on. Back to Niger. The insecurity in the region. Now, as it stands, Niger's airports are controlled by the French army. There are about 1,500 French troops on the ground. The US has about maybe like 1,000 troops themselves. Yet, they cannot catch Boko Haram. They cannot catch any of these groups that are agitating for peace and causing terrorism in that part of the world. Is that what you call independence? So, the legacy of France in Africa is one that could only be described as it's shocking it lasted 140 years, sorry. It's shocking. Next year will be 140 years from the Berlin Conference. And there is nothing you can say that these people did for Africa. Of course, we understand they were not doing it for Africa. But when you compare it let's not compare, but when you analyze it, it is obvious why these people why the army is stepping in and trying to take control for the benefit of their people. Okay, I'm going to get to my last couple of slides, but I just want to read some of your comments. Okay, US supported Savimbi. Thank you. Yeah. Jonas Savimbi of Angola, if you know the whole story there. All Africa is one, no trip, no division. We are Africa now becoming one country. Yes, absolutely. Galactic Soul. Yes, I've been listening to the Nigerian Senate. My brother, it's not the people, it's the dealers who called themselves leaders. Same in the Caribbean. My brother, it's not the people, it's the dealers who call themselves leaders. Same in the Caribbean. Okay. At least respect Nigerian people, not their government officials. Nigerian populace are against the war. The Nigerian populace, the individuals themselves are not people that we take seriously. And that's why I wanted to specify. I say Nigerians, not Nigeria. And maybe I didn't. Your knowledge knows no, but thank you, my dear. France was particularly parasitic on the francophone Africa issue, I imagine. Yeah. Yep. Lizzie, no surprise. Look at Haiti. You learn all you need to know. Absolutely. Sanctions on Haiti, and then America came and placed its own sanctions. I mean, anyway, yep, the writing is on the wall for France. Oh my God, that's true. They don't even use the franc. Yes. Yeah, France doesn't use the franc anymore since the year 2000 when the euro came in. France demanded and got reparations from Haiti from their independence. Let me even make a point on the franc. Again, I lived, amongst the other places, I lived in Switzerland, very close to France. France is about a 20-minute drive. So I was in France like every weekend. This is in the 90s, before the euro. And the French franc, but not just the French franc, the drachma of Greece, the lira of Italy, were on the same level as I was joking about the CDs, how useless it was. France, you know, like $1 was like, I don't know, maybe 300 francs. So they couldn't even manage their own currency to a place where it was strong enough, like say the Deutschmark. By the way, the euro is kept strong because of the Deutschmark. The Germans are the ones that keep the euro strong, because they're the only ones with a sort of stable economy. France is chaotic. Then when they had their own currency, they couldn't manage it, but they were going to give Africa the leftover of the franc. Greece, Portugal, all these nations that went into Africa as big boys hundreds of years ago, these people couldn't even manage their own affairs. And there is a saying, I don't remember who said it, but I heard it some years ago, which is in the same way that these nations have gone into Africa, they are declining. So what I mean by that is Greece is the obvious one first. Greece went into Africa thousands of years ago, stole from it, plagiarized it, etc. Greece, economic crash, the EU had to bail them out. Portugal went in, Christopher Columbus, you know, all of that crap, began the so-called early slave trade, if you will. Disaster of a country. If you watch my movie Mona, again, at the beginning, there's a monologue that's done in the movie, which is a quote from a phrase from Amilcar Cabral, where he says, these people are the backward people of Europe. They don't even make toy planes. They are supported by NATO. Portugal is useless. Italy, you only have to look at Italy. The lira, those of you who traveled to Italy in the 90s when they used to use the lira, this money was so useless. So useless. Even in Nigeria at the time, I think a dollar was like 50 naira in the early 90s when we went to Italy. So even our currency was stronger. These people can't even manage their own affairs. They are also declining. And now we see it happening with France. Very soon, the time will come for the Nordic countries, which, by the way, their currencies too are pretty weak too, you know. But they prop it up. They prop it up somehow. But you'll start seeing it come to the northern part of Europe soon. Just wait and see. This isn't going anywhere. France demanded and got reparations from Haiti for their independence. Matty, leave. May Almighty protect Niger and all the peoples who support Niger and punish the people who go there fighting Niger. Amen. Amen. I have no respect for anything the West has to say. Ouattara lived in France for a long time, only to show up to contest for a controversial presidential election. Ouattara being the president of Ivory Coast. Even more coups than Central or East Africa. Very interesting. Never knew that. Yes. Even more coups in Central or East Africa. Remind me what that point is. I can't remember. That's what kills me with all these useless African institutions. AU, ECOWAS meeting with France, inviting Israel to AU meetings. My brother, Thank you again, Modin Guy. 2,100 kids will think ancient, is that South Africa? We're like Egypt. Sad. What does Ouattara think of all these things? Please, let's not even talk about that. But and Nigeria itself does not have a good power supply for its people. Yeah, Nigeria lives in perpetual darkness. Yet we're supplying not just power to them; we supply power to Benin as well. To the west of us. It's because the former French colonies perceive the former British colonies as more developed, the erroneous notion that the British are better. Yeah. But also I think the British have, anyway, let's not boast about who was the better colonial. I don't even like that argument. Nigeria has no power grid really. Did the religious and societal culture of these places have anything to do with it also? Did the religious and societal culture, my brother, please just remind me what we're talking about. Karma. The US is facing its own karma. You cannot go and destabilize the nations for decades and not have the karma come back on you. Absolutely. It's the age-old tale of the Roman Empire. Not just the Roman Empire, the Greek Empire. You eventually, Rome fell because it was fighting wars on numerous fronts. America may not be physically at war with anybody, but it's at war with everybody. A, because it's a target. And Americans, by the way, and I have a statement for my brothers and sisters in America that I'm going to do at the end. Americans are oh God, what was I about to say? Americans are at war with everybody, but may not be physically engaged in any war. And the reason why I say that is because America right now is having to play a game where they used to be the big bully. Another bully analogy, and they could back it up because they had the muscles, they were martial arts experts, everything. But they got older, and when you get older, you get sloppy. Now all of a sudden, we're looking at your elections, and we're like, actually, your elections are pretty bad too, And now you're bold about it. We're looking at your society, and we're like, I know you have McDonald's and Coca-Cola, but we don't need that McDonald's, Coca-Cola if it comes with all this. Societal stuff, let's just leave it like that, where people can do whatever they want and so on, where there's no structure to your society. Now people are starting, and then obviously their sojourn into the so-called Middle East has meant that they have even more enemies, in the sense that now it's not even that we need your help. Now we want nothing to do with you. Now we're going to try and terrorize you. Americans used to be able to travel to many places in the world. I think I just recently read somewhere that Canada has surpassed you in terms of most popular passports. The American passport used to be like, you travel with an American passport, it means a lot. Now it means, there are a lot more places you cannot go to. Fine, there are places you can go to without a visa, but there are certainly a lot more places now that are saying, no, we don't need you. Basically, we've been enslaved for 500 years by Europeans. Lucky Sinclair, all of these infiltrators, countries shall fall. Depravity will be the gravity of greed. Absolutely. All right, let me just wrap up now, because there's some points I wanted to bring up. Number one, I wanted to talk about what's next for Niger, and I've broken it down into short, medium, and long term. Okay, this is just my view of what I think will happen. Of course, feel free to disagree. Again, give me a 1 if you think you might be able to join in. I'd love to hear some of your points later if you want to jump on the live as well. Not compulsory, please. Some of you, I know Lizzie is too shy. Galactic Soya too shy. But anybody else wants to jump on, you're welcome to. Okay, so in the short term, before we even get to the short term, life is going to be hard for Nigerians. In the short term. There's going to be more and more instability across this part of Western Africa. It's not going away anytime. This situation is not going away anytime soon. Rest assured. Now, the short term, when I say the short term, I'm talking about a period of 2 to 3 months. Let's just forget about this whole reinstate Bazoum. Bazoum will not be reinstated. Okay. Of all the coups that have happened in Africa, it's only one time I think I know of that a president has been reinstated, and that was back in the 60s in Gabon. Leon Mba, the early president before Bongo. You see, Omar Bongo. Omar Bongo is the father and Ali Bongo is the son. Omar Bongo, before Omar Bongo, there's a coup. And how did they even reinstate him? Because they reinstated him with the French army, if you remember. Because if you remember, Gabon is one of those, in terms of what it should be, it's one of the wealthiest places in the world. Should be. Again, next to Congo and all these resource-rich places. But the French reinstated him. This was 1964. Now, had the Wagner group not been messing around with Mali or Burkina or any of these places, you would have seen, I believe, French troops reinstating Bazoum in some way, shape, or form. I absolutely believe it. And I have to look at the Mali example with the Islamists. It's only recently that French troops left this part of West Africa. It's only recently, right? Look at all the coups that occurred whilst they were on the ground. Look at the coups that happened in Mali back in 2012. Look at the coup that happened a few years ago. Look at the coups that occurred in Burkina Faso. Look at even the removal of Blaise Compaoré in Burkina Faso. All of these things happened under France's watch because they were supposedly fighting terrorism. Had Wagner not been there or been messing around with this region, you would have seen French show up on the ground, maybe not physically. Maybe they have a command center that gets an elite group of paramilitary soldiers that are trained by France to go in and reinstate Bazoum. You look at Haiti last year, was it last year or 2 years ago, when they assassinated the head of state? The US did this. And they said of these troops, these soldiers that came in were US trained, but they were not US citizens. I mean, it's ridiculous. But anyway, that's in the short term. Medium term, I'm talking anything from 2 to 6 months. These ECOWAS sanctions, and I know they've said two things. They've contradicted themselves today, by the way. They said on the one hand, ECOWAS will continue dialoguing, but at the same time, let's mobilize the troops. Okay, these ECOWAS sanctions don't seem to be backing down. Also, they keep sanctioning. They keep finding things to sanction. And of course, you know, the increased isolation of Niger from not all of ECOWAS, but for the majority of ECOWAS, would mean that their allies, the allies that they do have, Burkina, Guinea, Mali, would have to get intervention from Russia or Wagner, even if it's not militarily, but to bring in the aid, to bring in the necessary medicine, fuel, whatever it is that they need. They're going to need to work with these people, and they could obviously bring it through those channels, Mali, etc. Could also bring it from the north through Algeria. They could also bring it from the east through Chad and Sudan. So at some point, we're going to really be facing this Cold War thing again. We're going back to the 60s and the 70s. Because again, the leaders that we love so much in Africa were people who were Marxist-Leninists. Thomas Sankara, J.J. Rawlings in a way, Amilcar Cabral, Samora Machel, Eduardo Mondlane, who again, all these leaders that we look at were Marxist-Leninists, sided with whether it's Cuba, but Cuba essentially socialist, and Russia. Mao Zedong, even when you talk about the Black Panther Party, the people that most Black people aligned with at the time of post-independence were Reds, socialist people. So it's no wonder that, you know, and by the way, Russia, by, you know, it may be not called the Soviet Union, but it's still the Soviet Union. It really is still the Soviet Union, at least, and certainly their relationship with the West is still treated the same way it was treated up until 1990. It's still the Soviet Union versus the West. That's basically what we're still looking at, except they've broken off. And, you know, the Ukraine issue is one where they're battling to decide, Ukraine, are you on our side or are you on the other side? Hence the war. But back to my point, Russia and Wagner have to now step in to supply. If Putin is already saying that you're going to help, we're going to supply us with, you know, the grain, you're going to remove the 23 billion worth of debt, and you're going to give us weapons, you're basically saying I'm an ally. Whether it's through Wagner or Russia directly, it doesn't really matter. But ECOWAS will be forced now to at least suggest military intervention to support the Western propaganda against Russia. They will be forced to, because you have to feed the hungry lion, which is the West, which says, no, Russia is the bad guy. So if Africa, the cradle, the breadbasket of the world, decides, well, not all of Africa, but if this part of Africa decides that we're going to side with Russia, what does that say about your opinion of Russia? And even the moderate states, the more liberal states of Africa are already like looking at Russia. South Africa is supposed to be the biggest, excuse my South African people, I don't mean it in a bad way, but you are, of all the black states, you're probably the biggest of all Uncle Toms, because you shun, and this is controversial, I understand, but the nation of South Africa, the nation, not the individuals per se, some individuals too, shun people from other parts of Africa because they recognize that what they have built, what has been built for them, what they have is different to what has existed everywhere else. And in a way, it wasn't built by them in the traditional sense where, say, Rwanda, where they've come from hardship and they've created something. In South Africa, they took the white model and reappropriated it. It's almost like what's the thing they call when you give black people the job over the white person? What's the thing called again? Anyway, it'll come back to me. But they in South Africa, they're a lot more moderate. They're a lot more on the other side. They're a lot more liberal on that side, but also so desperate to hang on to their thing. But they are part of BRICS, the BRICS nations. So they have to look at Russia as a major ally. So if Russia is supporting that central part of Africa, which is under military control, South Africa supports them too, which is a big blow to the Western powers, because that is the one place that people will consider. When I did the show some months ago where I was talking about places to visit in Africa, I didn't mention South Africa, not because people don't go there. It's because people, largely Western people, find it more comfortable to go to South Africa because of the infrastructure that's been built there. Okay, but let's not make this about South Africa. So, point I was making is a split ECOWAS will be forced at least to suggest military intervention to support the propaganda against Russia. A split in ECOWAS now will happen, at least until a resolution on this issue of Niger is found. There will be a split in ECOWAS. You've already seen our people in Mali, Burkina, Guinea saying to themselves, if you declare war on Niger or if you invade Niger, we will take this as an act of war ourselves, which is not a thing that you want to say to young military officers. Ibrahim Traore, the president of Burkina, is a 35-year-old guy. Okay, 35-year-old. He's only, he's younger than me, but he's still he's got the vibrancy of Thomas Sankara. Thomas Sankara was 33 when he took over as president. Yakubu Gowon of Nigeria was 29 or whatever he was, 28, 29. So we've had a lot of young leaders. Murtala Mohammed was pretty young too, about 33. But these people were able to leave a legacy. I'm not saying that going to war is the right thing, but these people believe in what they're saying. The joys of age is that you become more and more conservative as you get older. But, that notwithstanding, these are not people you want to mess with because they're not going to be cowards. They're not part of the old school where it's all about putting money in your pocket. They're idealistic. And when you're idealistic, you'll go to any length to prove your idealism. Now, so Mali, Burkina, they said they will withdraw from ECOWAS and will treat war on Niger as a declaration of war on them. Now, the military junta will have to quell civil unrest at some point. Right now, everything is all cushy. Everything's good. Everybody's happy. Everybody's rejoicing in the streets. Okay, they've turned off the lights. Okay, there's no aid coming in. Okay, this, okay, that. So now it's starting to get real. So the military is having to face an issue where, it's now you have to also start controlling your people and managing their expectations, because the people are there saying to themselves, okay, something needs to change. At least when we had the presidency of Bazoum, we were able to fly out, in theory. We were able to get goods in. We were able to have this. We had power, etc. Now they don't all of a sudden. Okay. So, and also this is a very important phrase that I think we forget, because I talked about this in depth last week. Military rule is not something that's supposed to be there, forever. It's something that's supposed to be there as a placeholder to remind the democracy that if you mess up, we will step in. It's not supposed to be there indefinitely. But obviously this military, the people that are in control at the moment, they're negotiating on one front if you will, with ECOWAS or with its neighbors. They're facing sanctions on another, and they're getting increased pressure from a major power outside of Europe to side with them, as well as getting conflicting pressure from the rest of Europe, the western part of Europe, to say, don't do this, don't do that. Okay? So there's a lot of pressure on these men, and they are soldiers, not diplomats. They are soldiers, not Democrats. They are soldiers, not elected officials. They only know how to follow orders. So, I wish them the best of luck, but it's a difficult thing. Remember, there's a saying, the most benevolent military government is worse than the worst civilian government. In other words, even the best of military rule is not as good as the worst of democratic rule. Democracy is what we've got. Frankly, I wish we could return to a way of controlling our own societies using our kings and queens or whatever, but that's gone. That's gone. Now, the last thing is the long term. The long term meaning a period of 3 to 12 months, could really be up to 15 months. I think we're going to have some sort of domino effect of anti-French sentiment, which is the good thing. We're going to see it in Togo. We might see it in Benin. We might see it in Ivory Coast, Senegal. And hopefully, if things happen the right way, we will see the eventual collapse of the franc CFA, the French franc, the currency which is used by most of the French colonies that exist in Central and West Africa, with the exception of Guinea. We will see the collapse of this, at least in the 5 countries that are under, 4 countries that are under, 5 countries, because Chad is not in West Africa, but it's the same region, and they do use the French currency. But I think we will start to see the collapse of this currency in time. I don't know if it will be at the beginning or much later with I think whatever new regime comes in after the military will have to enforce these things. France's time in these 5 countries at least is gone. It's dead. The unity of the military controlled states, I think, is something that is important. I think they will eventually become some sort of, if negotiations don't go well, they will eventually become some sort of pariah amongst ECOWAS and maybe even the AU, the African Union. Almost like, again, the Iron Curtain. The Iron Curtain, if you know, from the wall that's created in Berlin all the way east, is a separate block of Europe, whereas everywhere else lived life the way they wanted to. But that part lived life under the so-called Iron Curtain. And I think we're going to see, if we're not careful, we're going to see this happening at some point over the next 12 months. So it basically is pitting Africa into 3 blocks. You have the northern bloc with the the Maghrebi states, if you want to call them that, Morocco all the way to Egypt. You have the bloc in the middle, Sudan all the way to Guinea. And then you have the other bloc up until South Africa, right? So you have 3 blocks that are being formed. And who out of all those other blocks wants to challenge that bloc in the middle when they have that crazy ally called Russia? The military, again, back to this point of transitional government, you need a plan. With other countries, Mali, Guinea, etc., they've all said at various times, they said, okay, we're going to give 2 years, 1 year before we give democracy a chance again, just to build up to it, but a military with no plan for a transitional government, and keep in mind, this is only 8 days old, this coup, 10 days old, whatever it is. If you have no plan, it leads to danger. And it also leads to more coups, by the way, because one military officer might say, okay, I could do this better than what these guys are doing. That's what we saw in Nigeria we saw in 1966, twice in 1966. We saw it in 75. We saw it in 83, and immediately we saw it 83 and January 1885. Short spaces of time, because you're like, I can do this better than this guy, So we have to be careful. We saw it in Mali 11 years ago. Tinubu's ego is the other thing I want to talk about. Shout out to Courtney. How you doing, my sister? Tinubu's ego and lack of experience could be fatal for him politically, and even maybe for democracy in Nigeria if he mobilizes troops. You know, I remember in the live that I did when I was talking about the elections, I think I might have called, maybe I didn't call it, let me not exaggerate, but I sort of hinted at the fact that Tinubu's election is likely to do more for African unity and African freedom, specifically Nigeria, than anything else, because this was a man who had no mandate. It's not based on any track record. Yes, he had been a minister and a senator, but this was not a man who, you know, really believed he could do anything. He just said, "Emi Lokon, it's my turn." The only solution for all parties at the moment is a more powerful ECOWAS. In other words, let's stick together somehow. Let's find a way to stick together. Let's find a way not to judge these Nigerian people. Let's find a way to allow them to sort their internal differences out. Let's give them power back. Let's give them a gesture, throw them a bone, saying, let's give you guys a chance to figure this thing out, but we need you to give us a time period of when you can get it done. And I know ECOWAS has all these things written in the Lome, in the Accra, what is it called? The Accra Convention, whatever it's called, the document that states what ECOWAS should do in these situations. But they, you know, all Africa must know that the military coups are a result of bad governance. They must acknowledge that. They must state that publicly so that it's clear to the military that they are not being treated like bad students or bad little kids, and they need a slap on the wrist. All right, last slide is coming, guys. This is my very last slide. It's a message to Black people about Russia, okay? I want to be very, very clear with my statement here. I am not supporting any one European or Eurasian country. I am not. But I've just noticed that we have this pushback that we immediately throw to Russia the minute we hear Russia. And that has to do with the way we are raised and the society that educates us. Again, I gave you that quote by Nelson Mandela last year. Is the mistake that we make in the West, that the West makes, is they think that their enemies are supposed to be our enemies. In other words, us African people are not supposed to have the same enemies as you. In fact, there's a saying, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. But more importantly, we need to purge the colonial from within us. This is a phrase by Justice Oputa. Justice Oputa was a high court judge in Nigeria, very educated man, had the Truth and Reconciliation Oputa panel, they called it, back in 99, 2000. Very educated man, very wise man. He said, we must purge the colonial, which is the phrase that I use all the time, which is we all have that imaginary white person, European in our heads, which we must rid of. We must get rid of. We need to re-Africanize in the head with a K, letter K, re-Africanize your mind. All countries have to do business, but we have to do business when it's mutually beneficial. In other words, we don't just sit down and say, Russians, nobody likes Russians, so I'm not doing business with them. But what if Russians make the best vodka? I'm just saying, it doesn't have to be vodka. I don't like Germans, but what if Germans make the best cars? Maybe I can get them to come over and assemble a power plant here. We'll employ only Africans, but they will, it's their company, but we take 51% because it's in our country. That's what Paul Kagame, you people are laughing about, some people criticize Paul Kagame. Frankly, I look at where you came from to where you are. Paul Kagame went and told Carnegie Mellon University, it's like, rather than they wanted to give scholarships to Rwandese to come to America and study at Carnegie Mellon. He's like, no, take your money, come and build a school here. Let my people stay here. He did the same thing with the mobile phone company. I forget the name of the mobile phone company that they have, cell phone. They wanted to make a phone in India. Now he was like, okay, look, you can send us the phones like they do with Techno and all these companies in Nigeria, or come and build the plant here, employ my people, let them learn how to do it. Within a few years, we'll build our own. NBA, the NBA, one of the biggest commercial exports that America has. Come and start a league here. Rather than all our players running to America to try and play. Look at Serge Ibaka. What's this Greek boy? What's his name? The Yoruba boy. You know, all these people that are running to Europe in order to have an opportunity. Stay here. It's wise. We all have to do business, but it has to be mutually beneficial. And when you look at the way France has done business in this part of the world, it's never been mutually beneficial. Never been mutually beneficial. It's always been in their favor. Russia, again, does business with the EU, at least did a lot of business with the EU up until 2023, despite the sanctions they had with Russia, etc. It's business. China does business with the US. Now, there may not be an actual war, but there's clearly tension about how China runs its society. It's a socialist country, which is anti-democracy. It goes against the US's whole plan of spreading democracy around the world. Yet they do business. In fact, to the extent where they're shipping the business of the US to China. And you wonder why China is getting more and more powerful. We need to start seeing the hypocrisy in our master's eyes and how that reverberates around in the world. You know, North Korea and South Korea, they're split because of US intervention. US comes out of the Second World War, goes straight into Korea to destabilize it. Now, relatives in North and South for the last 70 years have not been able to connect. I know they had one or two like cross-border things, but now you have two separate blocks. They created a monster because they don't mind their business. Latin America is in turmoil because of the USA's foreign policy throughout the 1950s, all the way up until till recently, really. You know, Obama released eased sanctions against Cuba in 2016, and all of a sudden, Donald Trump comes back, puts them back in. You know, Hugo Chavez is dead. Nicolas Maduro has his country looked like it was going somewhere under Hugo Chavez. Now it's completely like there's no hope for it. It looks like there's no hope for Venezuela. The FARC rebels of Colombia. All these people are in chaos because of US foreign policy. The Iran-Contra. Let's get to the Iran-Contra, by the way. The US places the Shah of Iran first, then replaces him with the Ayatollah. What did that create? Chaos. Go and watch the movie Argo if you want to have a little bit of understanding about it. Chaos, death, mass migration of Iranian people outside of the country. Genocide, war in the region, culminating, of course, in the First and Second Gulf Wars. That's your master. That is your master. The person that makes you shake when you hear Russia. What do you think people in different parts of the world hear when they hear USA? That's why they're going out of their way, strapping themselves with bombs to go and blow up US embassies, US coffee shops, because of what your master is doing. And by the way, there are many other examples. I'm just highlighting the ones that we should all know. We should all know these things. Africa is now at the stage when we can look people in the eye and negotiate. These men are, what is Ibrahim Traore and General, what's his name? Abdurrahman from Niger. These are not people that, you know, they're not people that are like, Paul Kagame. Again, I talked about this last week. Paul Kagame is an ex-soldier himself. These are men that are not like, okay, yeah, you know, yeah, okay. What do you think, Mr. Macron? What do you think, Mr. Biden? What do you think? They're watching how incompetent these people are. They look at Macron. Macron was what, 38, 39 when he became president? He's like, this is a small boy. They look at Joe Biden and say, this Baba should go and sleep. He doesn't have any business running a country right now. We can look people in the eye now and negotiate and say, you know what, that deal doesn't work for us. Sorry. Cancel that deal. 140 years of colonialism next year. Colonialism next year, 1884. 140 years it will be next year. And it has taught us one thing. One thing we should all have learned is that a leopard shall never, ever change its spots. The good thing is now we have identified we have learned how to identify the leopard. We have learned how to identify the leopard. Whereas 100 years ago, 20 years ago, we were still unsure. Now the leopard is showing all the things that they do and showing the weaknesses that they have. So why on earth should we listen to you? So that's my last slide, guys. Let me take some of your comments. Trevor E, thank you for the super chat. My brother, appreciate you. A lot of comments. Hit the like button, please, please, please. Again, give me a 1 if you think you want to jump on. I know some of you want to, but it would be good to see some of you on this live. If you had any points you want to bring up. Okay, so where are we? Mark, don't kill me, Mark, please. Mark, let's not go there. Luckily, we trust Nigerians will endure in order to become victorious. We got their back spiritually. We are there. Yes, that's the spirit. We Americans need to mind our own business and stop trying to make the world in our image. I would even go a step further, sister. If you're an African person in America, however you want to call yourself, whether you want to call yourself Black American or African American, embrace the dual aspect that you are blessed to have. Because if a Korean person or an Indian person or a Pakistani person or a French person or even a Nigerian person that's raised in America can still identify with a country outside, we need to be able to do that too. Even if you don't identify with a country, identify with the continent. Africa is us too. If you're an African person in America, Black America, whatever, you are African. You have to connect with that too. Also happened in Sierra Leone. Honora Ahmed Tijan Kaba was reinstated too in 1998. Kaba, was he reinstated? Reinstated, okay. You can even use, if you use that example, you can also use the example in is it Sao Tome in 2003? There was a similar thing, but that's not what I was that's not the point I was making. But good point nevertheless though. Tinubu is serious problem for Nigeria and Africa. This is a very happy desperate to please. South Africa is suffering from white proximity superiority. Hey, my brother, let's just say that one more time, please. That was serious. SA is suffering from white proximity superiority complex. Wow. In fact, I need to copy that statement, my brother. These young leaders are part of the technology generation. They have the information they need at their fingertips and know how to use it. Galactic Soul, Ashe, thank you, sister. Burkina Faso is already sending aid of food and other supplies to Niger. Thank you. Son of Noka, are we ever going to see anti-British and anti-American sentiment in Africa? That's the one I'm looking forward to. Good thing. Let's discuss it, actually. Because anti-British and anti-American sentiment is because Britain and America are liberal societies in the sense where every day, tomorrow, they can decide that, okay, this rule that's been in existence for 2,000 years, let's throw it away. So everything is changing constantly. And that appeals to more conservative societies like ours in Africa. It appeals to us because we're saying, okay, so we don't have to do that. There's a place in America and they have Coca-Cola and they have McDonald's. You know, these are, you know, and I see a lot of the things that are going on in Africa. And I'm like, when you're young, it's exciting. But when you get older and you think in the long term of your society, you're like, we're losing the society because we're aspiring to British and American society, which is very, 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 very dangerous thing when that is not indigenous to you. Is it 10 more countries to go? If the franc goes down, it is buffered by the euro. Exactly. And but how the euro even came together, and this is why Britain never joined, because I guess they realized, they say, aha, Italy, Greece, Italy with the drachma, Greece with the drachma, Italy with the lira, Spain with the what is it, the peso? What was it, Spain? And France with the franc. These people can't manage the societies. Where would the pound be? And in nearly 25 years of having the euro, the British pound is still the strongest currency. You know, Lizzie, I agree. I understand the Niger coup leaders may be in their feelings, but they need to talk, explain the why and what comes next. It could calm some nerves, but that is not up to them. It's up to, because they've they make a decision for whatever reason. And by the way, I don't believe for a second that they did it just purely in isolation. Yes, there were some needs that their people needed to meet, but they stepped in because they said, no, this is our country. Let's take control of it for the most part. But they were instantly dealt with sanctions, commotion, and all sorts of pressures. So they, and in a way, they've thrown the ECOWAS and the African Union a bone in a way, because yes, all the people that you sent to them to negotiate, they turned them down. But Lamido Sanusi, the former emir of Kano, he went there off his own back, and they're negotiating. They're talking to him. They've already almost said in a way that, look, we'll talk to someone. It's just, don't just send who you think you should send. And this is Tinubu again, sending a guy who was president 25 years ago, retired military army general, Sardana of Sokoto, to go and talk to these 40 and 45-year-old, I think 50-year-old is the oldest head of person in the army. It doesn't make sense. Then also they're seeing the double standards. We see what you guys did with Mali. You didn't put that much pressure. We saw what you did in Chad. Chad, you didn't even treat them half as bad as this. You even hugged their head of state at the last conference, whatever it was. Yes, and he started as a military leader. Baba Kambon says that all of the time. Yes, Baba Kambon is where I got the phrase from. I love Paul Kagame. Please excuse me, my Congolese friends. It's you can love Paul Kagame and still love Congo. Absolutely, son of Nok. My brother, please, let's not do this. This Congo crisis, and I've been wanting to talk about this. Maybe we should do a live on it next week. Congo crisis is one which we need to really dissect, because it's multi-layered, multifaceted, but it always starts from the Belgians. On 3 occasions, it starts from the Belgians, from the inception of the idea with the Congo Free State, all the way to the independence with King Leopold II, and after Leopold II, Baudouin, what they did, how they destabilized it with the US CIA to destabilize it, how they supported Mobutu Sese Seko. And then later, when the genocide in Rwanda was happening and nobody stepped in to assist, they didn't step in to help Rwanda, which was really one of their former colonies. Not that they should help, but they didn't step in on the side of Rwanda. Rwanda deals with the crisis. These people flee into Congo. That Congo thing is a very complicated issue. Very complicated. And I think it's worth talking about, but maybe another time. Yero Jallo. The ECOWAS leaders are fighting for their own interests, not the interests of their citizens, and they are calling themselves democratic leaders. The pound would have lost its value joining the euro. Absolutely. And that's why the British said that they weren't going to do it. So shout out to my people. Thank you so much. All right, I'm going to send the link quickly. We have time for a couple people to join if they want. So I'm putting the link in the chat. Thank you, guys. Please hit the like button, hit the super chat if you liked what you've been watching. And I'll give you guys some time. So also, guys, just to remind you, we do have a membership tier, one tier actually, just one level of membership that we have on the channel. So please join. Allows me to do a bit more of the work that I'm doing. Working on a movie actually, which we'll be filming next month, and also working to see if there's a way we can get more documentaries on the channel. But if you want to jump on, let's give it a couple minutes. If you want to jump on, the link is in the chat. Anybody wants to jump on, have anything to say, we can do that. Also, Let me just play this for you. So, if you haven't seen this, please, I would like to invite you to watch this for the first time if you haven't already. Egypt. No nation in the world has been debated as much as she has. Her dates, her language, her secrets, her people. But it's the history which has caused the most curiosity among scholars and visitors alike. This is my 5th time in Egypt, and I firmly believe to understand what Africans did on the Nile all those years ago, one must not just read about it, but be here to experience it. I'm excited to be going deeper and deeper along the Nile into Africa.
Rasta never die.
Aswan is the heartland of Nubia, and was once the capital of the Kushite empires, but which is where Kemet's true origins are found.
Onora. From where?
Nigeria.
Nigeria?
Yeah.
Okay.
When I look at him, he looks African. He's African. What does Egyptian look like? Her ancient monuments seem like a spirit from Egypt's glorious past. In all, 32 dynasties rule these lands over thousands of years. This land has been called by many names, but the name the progenitors of this part of the Nile once called it was Kemet, the land of the blacks. So that was that. For those of you who haven't seen it, I am seeing Modern Guys jumping in. Modern Guy, I think sort your camera out. Let me get you on. Put your camera on. Let me see you. Can you hear me? Hello? Yellow. Yeah, Modern, how you doing?
What's going on? How you doing, man?
I'm okay.
Can you hear me?
Where you? Yeah, I can hear you. I can't see you though. Are you hiding? What's the problem, my brother?
Okay. Hold on one moment. Hello,
How you doing?
How you doing?
I'm well, my brother.
Yes,
where you at right now? Which part of the world are you in?
I'm in the U.S. right now.
Okay, where in the U.S.?
In Georgia.
Okay. Well, welcome. You're the first one on. Good to see you. So what do you want to? Anything you want to talk about in particular? You wanted to bring up?
I was basically gonna say, like, I see, like, in that particular region of Africa, I would say Western Africa and also Northern Africa. I feel like it's more like radical, but I would say it's kind of like a domino effect that I'm seeing. Like, each country, the goal is to basically have control of their own resources and also to expel like their colonial masters and stuff. Even though that's been the goal for a long time, but now I feel like the more time that passes, I feel like now they're really gonna press that button and make sure that it happens. But yeah, and that's the same thing with I feel like that's kind of also a fear too, because the more you see other countries going through the same struggle, they feel like they have um, the same right to rise up because they feel like they went through the same struggle. So it's going to be more like of a domino effect, especially since those regions are close together. But also that will have an effect on other parts of not only Africa but other parts of the world. And yeah, I feel like it can get really, really hectic. And I would say that it's gonna get worse before it can get better.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I
I
feel like
agree.
yeah,
I agree with you. I mean,
yeah,
look, in terms of domino effect, it's very rare that things like this happen in Africa and they don't just spill over to every single place. You look in 2011 when you had the so-called Arab Spring. You have one thing happen in Yemen, travels over the Sinai into Egypt, into it goes everywhere as far as Morocco. So that issue happened. You even look at the issue that we had recently with uh, 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 Guinea and Sierra Leone and Liberia. Every time issues happen, they spread over. But this one in particular is very powerful because of the fact that there's a shared anti-colonial frustration that these people have with France. And so because it's there, because this France element is the common denominator, until they all get rid of France, there's going to be no peace or stability in the region. Even if this situation with Niger is fixed, the seed has been sown. So I agree with you. I agree with you. Are you your family is African or you American?
uh, my family is from Haiti, but I did the ancestry testing for my father's side, and
Okay.
it was saying that I was from Burkina Faso, and
Oh, really?
it said I was 100% on all people that come from my grandfather's side, and then it said from my mother's side it was saying Congo. So yeah, I went and did
Oh,
the
okay. So
DNA test.
Burkina and Congo. Look at that. Amazing. You
Yeah,
should go. My brother, you should
yeah, I
go.
want.
I don't know if you saw the live that I did a few months ago where I was saying places to go. Burkina is one place to go. At least if you go there during the FESPACO Film Festival, go there, go and experience it. You meet Africans from all over the place, and it's a good time to go. Go and see your home, my brother. Like, don't waste
Yeah,
time. Don't waste time. Go see your home, man. If that's where you're from, if you can find 100% of one side of your family from there, go. Don't waste time.
yeah. I'm actually supposed to be going. Well, really, I'm supposed to be going in for New Year's in January. But yeah, I wanted to make a trip out there too. And yeah, also I heard what you were saying about the French not even using the franc. That's amazing to me. I didn't even know that they don't really use their own what's it called, the West
Currency.
African.
Currency. They
Yeah,
use euro now. Yeah. They got rid of it back in like 99, 2000. But in Africa, they still print the currency for African states to use. And it's a very sad, very, very sad state of affairs. But it's
yeah,
things have to improve, and I'm excited at the place that we are. I know it's not going to get easy for a while, but it will get better. That's the most important.
yeah. And I was saying with Ibrahim Shahor, what you were saying, like these African leaders, they're not like regular people. They're like military. They grew up like military trained, or they're into combat and stuff. So they're like naturally going to be more like stern or assertive. And I feel like they need Africa. They need more leaders like that, especially with these business deals. Because I feel like they're gonna like the leaders that have like military experience. They're less likely to compromise or make those compromises with other nations that's not really beneficial towards them. But
Mm.
yeah, I feel like he's doing what you know what the people around him are saying, or what's good for his country. Like he was saying, he wanted. He specifically said he made a demand. He said he wanted energy. He said he needs energy, and he's even willing to go into nuclear energy. And
Mm.
yeah, just yeah, and especially he's not a he's not afraid to advocate for weapons and stuff. So he's basically, and I think he said that they're giving them free weapons and stuff.
Mhm.
So yeah, I feel like it's just, yeah, I feel like it's a good thing.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good thing. It's a good thing, and it's good to have different powers to align with instead of the traditional France, UK, America. It's after a while it just becomes ridiculous. But anyway, thank you, my brother, for joining. Appreciate you. We're gonna wrap up now.
Uh,
Tune in
Nick,
again. Good to speak to you. What's your name?
good to speak to you. My name is I go by Nadine, but my name is
Modine.
Dawson. So yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
I'll call you Modine. No problem, my brother. Good to see you, my brother. Speak to you again soon. All right.
Good to see you.
All right.
Thank you.
Have a good day. All right, people. Thank you so much for that. Since nobody is there, so nobody else is there, I'm going to wrap up now. Thank you so much again. Please hit the like button on your way out. I encourage you, if you feel led to, jump on the membership. It's only a small amount a month, and allows me to keep going, especially with these lives as well. It takes time to prep them. But anyway, I have to honestly commend my usuals, Lizzie, Yero Jallo, Son of Knock as usual, Refree, Farming Dreams, Cam, Lucky Sinclair, Son of Knock, Galactic Soul, long time. Look, Team Majek, Mark Omenyoko, good to see you, brother. Who else again? Modine as well. Honorine S, Cam, Matty Leave. These names are very special. I don't even know how you guys picked them. Abdirazak, Mukhtar, Umar, Oswald Morgan. If anybody I missed out, but thank you so much for the participation. Ricky Bobby, D. Musa Springer. Thank you so much for the participation today. I really appreciate it, my people. I'll be back again, hopefully next week. And yeah, great show as usual. Thank you so much. God bless you. All right. Everybody have a great day. Have a great weekend. And I'll speak to you again very, 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 very soon.